It is the largest sexual abuse settlement ever in higher education. Last week, the University of Southern California announced that it would pay more than $850 million to hundreds of women who were allegedly preyed upon by a campus gynecologist over nearly 3 decades. It's the third settlement that USC has reached with groups of victims. All told, USC will pay more than $1 billion to survivors in multiple legal settlements. The women were among thousands treated by Dr. George Tyndall. He was the sole full-time gynecologist at the university from 1989 until 2016, when he was finally suspended. Since then, he's been arrested, charged with dozens of assault counts, and is now awaiting trial. Audrey Nafziger is one of the survivors of the abuse. She's now a sex crimes prosecutor and deputy district attorney in Ventura County, California. And a warning, our conversation contains explicit language involving sexual abuse. Audrey Nafziger, thank you so much for being with us. This gynecologist was able to abuse these women, allegedly, over 27 years without the university moving to step in until the very end. How was that possible?
You know, Judy, it's almost inexplainable because there were complaints. I saw him in 1990, and I know that a woman in 1989 complained to the university, and they did nothing. And they received repeated complaints throughout the decades, and still they did nothing. They empowered him to continue to perfect preying upon women. It's just horrible.
As you said, you were one of the earliest victims. You said 1990. What happened to you, and what happened when you, how did you deal with it?
I saw him in 1990. And I went to the health center. He invited me into his room. He closed and he locked the door. I had very little experience with these types of medical exams, so I didn't know what to expect. And so after he locked the door, he had me get on the table, disrobe, put my feet in stirrups, and proceeded to give me an examination without gloves. He, during part of that examination, he asked to take photos of my body. He positioned my hands and helped me participate in those photos. And this is with an old 35 millimeter kind of camera. He told me it was for medical purposes, for treatment. He false diagnosed me with a sexually transmitted disease that I learned to find later was untrue. He went to the back of the room and dimmed the lights, and he started telling me a story about his time in the Philippines, how he passed a woman around in a bar with a bunch of men. I mean, it's just unbelievable. He told me how they were performing oral sex on her, and he kept asking me over and over again from the back of the room in the dark, Audrey, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? And he kept saying my name over and over again. And I just wanted to crawl up into a little ball and disappear. I didn't know what to make of that. I didn't know if he was coming to get me. I didn't understand at the time what was going on. It was very frightening, a frightening experience to endure. I later took my records with me when I graduated in 1992 from SC Law, and I carried them with me, and I promised myself that I would report him one day, and I never did. Like so many other survivors of these types of offenses, I didn't know if anyone would believe me. It was just me and him in a room. And later, when I opened my file, I saw that the record was negative, that he had done a lab test on me and it came back negative. And all of that was a big lie.
And there were so many other women who had experiences as bad as yours and even worse.
Absolutely. I've met several survivors where he tried the exact same tactic. And as a sex crimes prosecutor, I'm well aware that sexual predators will perfect their craft over time, and they'll keep doing the thing that works so that they can get to victims. They groom victims. They find ways of having access to them. And it was really just horrifying to find myself in the shoes that I find myself in, to know that I am one of thousands of women that he put his hands on for sexual interests in criminal, horrible ways. He did it for his own sexual sick desires. And the university basically backed him for all those years. Women young enough to be my daughters were his most recent victims. It's just unbelievable.
It's so hard to understand. And as you say, there were so many women didn't complain, but many did complain. And women who worked in his office as nurses or aides, they also complained. And yet these complaints were turned away. They weren't listened to by the university. We don't, is there any explanation for why?
Well, I can think of a couple of things. I mean, USC prides itself on its brand, and that has led to its downfall and many other scandals, not unlike this one. But I will say this, the board of USC, I believe, agreed, and the president, I think he backed it, paying Dr. Tyndall $200,000 to leave before the case broke. And the people that were making the bad decisions, there weren't women, there weren't minorities, there weren't stakeholders, there wasn't diversity, there wasn't a voice. I think that should be examined in this case. I think it's a problem.
There's also reporting, Audrey Nafziger, that he particularly singled out Asian American women. What do you know about that?
Oh, one of my dear friends is Asian American. She's a survivor. She's also one of the charged victims in the criminal case. The things that he told her, the way he approached her, and he used her race against her, because she's told me, I am not obviously Asian American, but she has told me that in her culture, they don't talk about sex. And if women were going in college to get birth control, which was one of the main reasons people saw him, they couldn't talk to their parents about it because they shouldn't even be having sex outside of marriage. So they were particularly vulnerable to him. And I think he knew that, and I think he exploited that. And that's what predators do. They pick their population and they exploit their vulnerabilities. And that's what he did here.
And given all that has happened, Audrey Nafziger, what more does USC need to do?
Well, they're going to have to diversify their board, and they need to change the makeup of the people that make the most important decisions. And they really have not done that yet. That needs to change, and it needs to change right away. USC should reveal their internal investigation. They promised to do so. They did an internal investigation, and I think that would show us all the people who knew and stood by and did nothing. And I think those people need to be held to account. That would be meaningful to me. I think it would be meaningful to all of the survivors. Other cases like this, like Larry Nassar and Penn State, other people were held to account, criminally charged, and sent to jail. And a lot of people stood by and allowed this to happen. I'd like to know who they are and why they didn't do anything.
Such a disturbing and painful story. Audrey Nafziger, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And USC is not the only major university in Los Angeles dealing with this issue. In January, UCLA reached a $73 million settlement with more than 5,000 women who were patients of a former gynecologist there, Dr. James Heaps. He faces more civil litigation, as well as over 20 criminal felony counts related to sexual conduct. Heaps has denied the allegations. Cuba took its first 20 detainees in 2002. Despite various calls to shutter it, almost 20 years later, it still stands. A new movie now tells the story of a man who spent more than 10 years within its walls. Amna Nawaz takes a look at The Mauritanian, playing in select theaters and now available to rent on demand. It's part of our arts and culture series, Canvas.
In 2016, Mohamedou Salahi was allowed to return home to Mauritania after being held for 14 years at the U.S. military prison at Guantanmo Bay. He was never charged. His book, comprised of letters to his lawyer, was read by millions worldwide.
I am innocent. I am innocent.
Now, millions more can watch his story in the movie The Mauritanian.
Not in my wildest dream have I ever dreamed that my story would be not only known in a book, but also that book is turned into a major motion picture.
Slahi, played by actor Taha Rahim, was picked up by Mauritanian police 2 months after 9/11. In August of 2002, he was moved to Guantanamo Bay, one of hundreds detained by the U.S. as an enemy combatant.
I think there were some people who were hungering for the message. We got them. And I think that for those who think about Guantanamo and see it as men in orange jumpsuits on their knees, the message that we got them was very raw at the time.
The New York Times' Carol Rosenberg has covered the prison for years.
Guantanamo is more than a place in some ways. It is the idea that you can pick people up and move them halfway around the globe and hold them as indefinite detainees in this war on terror, in this war that has nobody on the other side to end it.
The U.S. accused Slahi of recruiting the 9/11 hijackers and supporting al-Qaeda. They cited a phone call he once received from Osama bin Laden's spiritual advisor, a relative of Slahi's. Slahi, who fought with the U.S.-backed rebels in Afghanistan in the 1990s, says he never supported al-Qaeda and he didn't know the phone call was from bin Laden's satellite phone.
I always told myself, at the end of the day, I didn't do wrong to anyone.
He was tortured by his American interrogators, subjected to solitary confinement, physical beatings, and sexual humiliation. They threatened to kidnap, rape, and kill his family. For actor Taha Rahim, playing Slahi came with extraordinary pressure.
I was scared because I knew he was watching the movie, and of course he was the first audience member I wanted to please.
Taha Rahim for the Mauritanian.
But the role, which has earned him Golden Globe and British Academy Award nominations, also meant a chance to challenge stereotypes.
It's very rare to read a script, so to see a movie with a Muslim sympathetic character at the center of a Hollywood movie. I don't want to be typecasted, and I don't want to be an instrument to tell those type of stories.
You think I'm guilty?
To prepare, Rahim lost 20 pounds. He learned 2 new Arabic dialects. He had the set temperature turned down to the freezing cold Slahi endured and insisted on real shackles.
Why was that important to you?
To convey authenticity to the director, to the audience, and especially to Mohammed, out of respect to him.
Inside Guantanamo, Slahi endured months of brutal interrogations, and eventually he broke, signing a false confession. The government used it as evidence, but Slahi never saw the case against him. In 2005, with the help of lawyer Nancy Hollander, played by Jodie Foster, he filed a writ of habeas corpus. Slahi's lawyer, Nancy Hollander.
There was no case, but it took us a long time to show that there was nothing.
To help his defense, Hollander says she urged Slahi to write down his story.
You asked me to set fire to this place, but I'm still sitting.
Then write it down. Right, that's what the pages are for. Write it down. You need to tell me the truth. You need to tell me what happened to you. I can't defend you. Do you understand that?
I don't need to tell you nothing. Whatever I say, it doesn't matter. This f***ing island, I die here. Outside my family, my brother, their lives go on. Tara's life goes on. But me here, I'm like a statue.
I was so scared and so afraid, and I didn't feel like my lawyer appreciated how much fear I was in.
Despite the fear, he wrote, trusting Hollander with his story and with his life. Over years, their bond grew.
What do you want me to sign, Nancy? Who am I suing today? God?
No one today.
Then why are you here?
No reason in particular. I just didn't want you to be alone.
We loved each other. We cared about each other. We had become family.
In 2010, a judge ruled the government had no grounds to hold Slahi. He was ordered released, but an appeals process kept him at Guantanamo another 6 years.
There was a time when Muhammad said to me, if this is what Allah has for me, I can do it as long as they're not torturing me. And I said to him, I'll be here. I'll be here until we get you out.
Why did you make that promise to him? How did you know you could keep it?
I knew that I would never give up with him.
Slahi was released in October of 2016. Today, he says he holds no ill will towards his captors.
I expected to meet someone maybe with resentment, anger, and none of that. He goes like, when you come to realize that forgiving people who did bad things to you is a treat you give to yourself, you set your mind free.
Some, like Hollander, hope the power of this story helps propel change long overdue.
We want this film to make a change. We want it to be part of what closes Guantanamo, that brings us back to the rule of law. We cannot have indefinite detention anywhere, anytime in the United States.
Despite pledges by Presidents Obama and now Biden to close it, Guantanamo Bay remains open. 40 men are held there today in what's become the world's most expensive prison at an annual cost of $13 million per prisoner.
Guantanamo Bay is a complete insult to the dignity not only of those in Guantanamo Bay, but of American people, because American people by and large are good people and they deserve better than Guantanamo Bay.
For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Amna Nawaz.
Tonight on the NewsHour Online, what is safe to do once you've gotten a vaccine? As access to the shots expands, it is becoming a more